Is Mr. Ng going over the Precalc Chapter 4A test taken February 21st, 2020. This is the non-calculator part. Question number 1, multiple choice. Identify the quadrant for the angle theta satisfying the following conditions. Tangent of theta is greater than 0, that means it's positive. Cosecant of theta is less than 0, which means it's a negative. We had this phrase that can help you remember where the trig functions are positive. All students take calculus. All the trig functions are positive here. Sine and its reciprocal cosecant are positive. Tangent and cotangent are positive, and cosine and secant are positive. That means here, if cosine and secant are positive, that means everything else is negative. Sine, cosecant, tangent, and cotangent. Where is tangent positive? In all and in quadrant 3. Where is cosecant? Although the problem is asking for negative, I try to use the logic where is it positive, and that's where I don't want to go. Cosecant is positive here and here, but I don't want positive, so you can cross that off. That means it must be negative in these two. Well, the only one that actually meets both these conditions is quadrant 3. 1A is 3. Question number 2 is a free response question. Find the exact value of cotangent of theta given that cosine of theta is 3 over 4. Cosine with its letters is x over r, and cosine is positive. Then it tells us, and theta is in quadrant 4. Remember, cosine would have been positive in either quadrants 1 and 4, but now it's telling us in quadrant 4. Cosine, I have an x value that's positive 3 and an r value that's 4. So I have a 3 for the x value, and the radius is 4. Remember the bow tie part? Let's see if I can draw that so you can kind of see it. Because I have two sides of a right triangle, I'm going to have to use the Pythagorean theorem. R squared equals x squared plus y squared. Your r value is 4, and your x value is 3. So 4 squared is 16, 3 squared is 9. I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. You get 7 equals y squared. And why is it both plus or minus? Remember, 7 is equal to the square root of 7 squared, or negative square root of 7 squared. And that's the reason why it has to be both plus or minus. So now, if you look at your picture, the y-coordinates are going down. That's why it is a negative value. Repeat that again. The reason why the y value is negative and not positive, because it's going down on the y values, on the y-axis. You're supposed to find cotangent, and cotangent has the letters x over y. So my x-coordinate is 3, and my y-coordinate is negative radical 7. You're going to rationalize, so I'm going to multiply by 1. So whatever's in the denominator, you multiply on the top and bottom, because you can multiply a fraction times 1, it doesn't change. And then you multiply across. I get 3 radical 7. Radical 7 times radical 7 is radical 49, and radical 49 is 7. And a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So your answer is cotangent is negative 3 radical 7 over 7. If you forgot the plus sign, the negative sign, and you wrote 3 radical 7 over 7, I gave you 3.75. Or if you didn't know that the y value should have been negative radical 7, I gave you 3.5. or if you knew that it was negative radical 7, I give you 3.5. I give you 3 points if you found y to be radical 7, and 2 points if you drew a triangle in quadrant 4 and labeled it. Question number 3. Find tangent of theta. Theta, its starting point is up here. Based on this angle here, I'm going to start labeling it. You have the opposite side. Across the 90-degree angle, you have the hypotenuse, and then the leftover side, or the side next to, or the adjacent side, is called the adjacent. To find tangent, I need the opposite over the adjacent. That's from TOA. I don't need these two, and that is clarified by hypotenuse. Although we have it, we don't need this side for right now. To find tangent, I would have to be the opposite over the adjacent. My opposite side I found to be 5. And the adjacent side, it was unknown, so you would have to use the Pythagorean theorem. C, A, and B. C is the hypotenuse. C squared equals A squared plus B squared. The C value is 8, so 8 squared is 64. A value is 5. 5 squared is 25. Subtract. Take the square root. Remember, you're not on the coordinate plane, so here I'm going to take the positive value. B equals the square root of 39. So adjacent is 39. Rationalize, you get 5 radical 39 over 39. That would be choice B is your answer. Question number 4. Find the value of each variable. Write your answers in simplest radical form. The original problem had a right triangle with a 30-degree angle, and you have y, 90, and x. If this is 90 and this is 30, then this one must be a 60-degree angle for a 30, 60, 90 special right triangle. The formula is x radical 3 to x. The short leg is just x. The long leg is the short leg times radical 3, and then the long hypotenuse is 2 times the short leg, whatever x value is. So with this formula, I'm going to label across. So across the 30, I'm going to put an x. Across the 60, I'm going to write x radical 3, and across the 90, I'm going to write 2x. I'm going to start with the one that has something there. So it has no value, it has no value, this one has a value. X is equal to 9. Now I can take 9 here and put it in for every x value. So this x is 9, so this would give you 9 radical 3 across the 60. And across the 90, if I put in x equals 9 there, so it's 2 times 9, which gives me 18. And so these are my side lengths, 9, 9 radical 13, and 18. So x is 9. What happened here? Sorry, I'd say that again. Across the x value was a 60 degrees, so x is 9 radical 3, and your y value is 18. Remember, you can also do an equilateral triangle. Let's see if this helps. This is a 60, this would be a 30, so this is 9. These are congruent, so this would also be 9, so this whole length is 18. 18, 18. If you knew this was 18, you can also use Pythagorean theorem. 9 squared plus x squared equals 18 squared, and get those answers as well. Interesting enough, this was the non-calculated part of the calculator, So if you chose to use trig ratios, that was actually incorrect. This was actually asking you if you can figure out using the special right triangles. So if you gave me equations using the trig ratios, and you have a CRE, calculator ready equation, I only gave you 3. Because it tells you simplest radical form, which implies there are radicals, and not using your calculator. I gave you 3.5 points if you found one of those to be correct, or you drew the triangle correctly and you got one of those correct. So this front side was out of 12 points. Let's go to the back side. Remember, you did not have to use the unit circle. It was optional. And so if you didn't know my counting technique, I'm starting on the left side, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then count down, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And count back up, 1, 2, that should be, 4, 0, and then 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Put all of them under denominators of 2. And you take the square root of the numerators. Those are all square roots. So square root of 4 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So the order pair here is 0, 1. And that implies, and you can do the same thing on this side. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Then count back up. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, everything in quadrant 1 is positive, positive. Everything in quadrant 4 is positive, negative. Those are negatives. In quadrant 3, everything is negative, negative. And everything in quadrant 2 is negative, positive. Then you can do your angles. You can count the 30 degree angles by doing it over 6. So we're doing 0 pi over 6, 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, which is pi over 3, 3 pi over 6, which is pi over 2, 4 pi over 6, 2 pi over 3, 5 pi over 6, 6 pi over 6, which is pi, 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6, which is 4 pi over 3, 9 pi over 6, 10 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6, and then 12 pi over 6. And then the 45 degree angles are counting by ones with denominator 4. So 0 pi over 4, 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4, 8 pi over 4. Remember, you don't need to use the unit circle. You could have just drawn out all of your triangles. So you can use both, or rather you actually just draw out your triangles. Question number 7. Simplify, write your answers in simplest radical form. 2 times tangent of 5 pi over 4 minus 2 times sine of 270 degrees. Tangent of 5 pi over 4 is in quadrant 3. And if you know this is 4 pi over 4, because that's a pi, then that means this would just be 1 pi, right? Because 4 plus 1 gives you 5 pi over 4. So this is a pi over 4, which is a 45 degree angle. Across the 45 is a 1, in this case a negative 1. Across the other 45 is also a 1, in this case it's going to be negative because it's going left. And always across the 90 degree angle for 45, 45, 90 is going to be a radical 2. Here's the formula. X radical 2. In this case, it'll be 1, 1, the coefficient. And then radical 2. Those are the numbers you're using. And if you didn't like working with that, remember, you can always just convert that into degrees to give you some numbers. Because it doesn't matter, you're just evaluating, you just need to find the position where it's at. So again, my trick is pi is 180. So 180 times 5 gives you 900, and 900 divided by 4 gives you 225. So essentially what you're doing is you're trying to find the 225 degree angle. Now tangent is y over x, so -1 divided by -1 is a positive 1. And then 2 times 1 gives me the 2. If you're using the unit circle, you would just go to 5 pi over 4. Tangent is y over x, so negative radical 2 over negative radical 2 is positive 1. Sine at 270 is a quadrantal angle. 0, 90, 180, 270. The order pair is 0, -1, and the r value is 1. And sine is, it goes cosine sine. So your sine value here is -1. Remember, sine is y over r, or the y values. So -2 times -1 is positive 2, and then 2 plus 2 gives you 4 is your correct answer. To give you partial credit for that problem, if you got one of those correct, I give you 3.5. If you drew correct triangles, but maybe you didn't get an answer, then I give you 3. Question number 8. Find the angle of smallest possible positive measure. That just basically means you need a number between 0 and 360 degrees. You can include 0, not 360 because it's coterminal, with a given angle. So we kind of made this equation given times the n, which is the number of rotations, either positive or negative. So you would add that, times whatever you have, 360 degrees or 2 pi. And this would give you the new one that you needed. So if you did that, essentially what you would do is -pi over 6. I need a positive, so I'm going to have to get this between 0 and 2 pi, or 12 pi over 6. And that means I have to do a positive rotation, and this would be 2 pi. So this would be negative 1 pi over 6. 1 floration times 2 pi is put over 1, and denominators of 6, so that would give you 12 pi over 6. And then your new one would be -1 plus 12 would give you 11 pi over 6 as your answer. One long answer could have been converting it to degrees and then going back to radians. You could do that. Probably not fun, but it will get you your answer. If you gave a blank equation without filling that in, I gave you a 2. If you said this was -30, sure. If your equation was correct, like you filled it out, but not the answer, I give you a 3. A common mistake in this problem was to, let me write that, CM, was to write 330 degrees. You are correct, this is 330 degrees, but I gave you radians, so you should give an answer in radians. Well, it doesn't say it, it kind of implies it. It's kind of, you went to the store and you buy a soda that's 95 cents, you give them $1. Do you want them to give you a change in pesos or yen or yuans? Or Canadian dollars? No, you would want it in American dollars because that's what you gave them, and that's what they're asking for the price. Alright, these were probably the most missed questions. Remember, an exact value is radicals, no decimals, which implies that you shouldn't be using your calculator. Cosecant at 7 pi over 6. You have on the quadrantals 0, pi over 2, and this is pi. That's 6 pi over 6. That's an equivalent, right? That means this one here is 7 pi over 6. And so this one, zoom in for you, has a distance of 1 pi over 6. So the reference angle, alpha or theta prime, the reference angle inside, is a pi over 6 or 30 degree. Remember, always a 30, 60, 90, you will have the formula 1x, 2x, and x radical 3. So then those are actually the numbers you're using, not without the x's there. So across the 30 will always be a 1. In this case, it's negative 1 because it's going down. And then it's your y value because it parallels the y-axis. Across the 60 degree angle, which is down here, this is going to be a radical 3. In this case, it's negative because you're going towards the left. And then your r value will always be 2. Remember, all students take calculus. So cosecant is r over y. So you're going to have 2 over negative 1, and the answer is negative 2. Remember, because of all students take calculus, cosecant is negative here. I gave you 1 point if you said negative 1/2, or if you just said positive 2. If you wanted to use the unit circle there, 6 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, cosecant is reciprocal of sine, so you would just take negative 1/2 and flip that, and you'll get negative 2. Question 9b, tangent 270 is y over x at 270. So you have 0, 90, 180, 270. Unit circle means it's 1 unit away. The order pair is 0, negative 1, and your r value is 1. These are called quadrantal angles. And then tangent is y over x, so negative 1 over 0. The common mistake, I gave 1.5 points. You didn't have your calculators, but you can't divide by 0. Negative 1 divided by 0 is not 0. It's undefined, so your answer is undefined. So if you wrote 0, I gave you 1.5. I give you 1 point if you did 0 over negative 1, or y over x, and then you can simplify from there. How do you find that on the unit circle? 270, y over x, negative 1 over 0 is undefined. And then question 9c. You want this to be a positive angle to work with. So I added a coterminal angle. One full rotation is 2 pi. 2 pi over 1, and I have a denominator 3, so I multiplied. So 2 pi is essentially 6 pi over 3. And then 6 and a minus 2 gives me 4 pi over 3. So basically I'm trying to find sine at 4 pi over 3. This is 3 pi over 3. This would be 4 pi over 3, so this is a distance of pi over 3. And pi over 3 is a 60 degree angle. Now again, if you didn't know that, try to zoom in. Pi is 180. 180 degrees divided by 3 is 60. Always across the 60 is a radical 3. In this case, this is a y because it parallels the y-axis, and it's negative because it's going down. X values are across the 30 will be a 1, and it's negative because it's going towards the left, and the r value is 2. So sine is y over r, which would give you negative radical 3 over 2. I give you 1 point if you miss the negative sign. Remember what Mr. Hallenkart would tell us, all students take calculus. Tangent and cotangent are positive, everything else is negative, including sine. If you're using the unit circle, negative 2 pi over 3 is not here, but you can find 4 pi over 3. Here it is, and we're finding cosine and then sine, so my answer is just going to be negative radical 3 over 2. So that side was 6 plus 8, so that side was 14 points. And then check 12 plus 14 gives you 26, plus name and period gives you 28.5.